The sun fell lower behind the jagged hills, staining the sky the color of dried blood, and with every fading ray, Daniel Carter felt the weight of his decision press harder against his chest. The cow stood tethered near the barn, chewing calmly, unaware that its warm body and steady breath were the price of a man's dignity. One cow, that was all it took to change a life. For Daniel, that cow meant survival through winter. Milk for strength, calves for the future. Without it, the ranch would die. And with the ranch, the last piece of his father's memory would vanish into dust. People in town whispered as he walked past them, their eyes sharp with curiosity and judgment. They all knew why he was here. They all knew he was marrying a woman he had never truly seen, a stranger he had barely spoken to, a woman others cruelly described with mocking laughter. Daniel kept his head down. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. Hunger had stripped that from him long ago. Inside the small wooden chapel, the air smelled of old pine and candle wax. It was too quiet. No music, no laughter, no celebration. Just a handful of witnesses, mostly. Curious neighbors who wanted a story to tell over supper. Daniel stood at the altar in a worn jacket that had once belonged to his father. The sleeves were a little short, the shoulders too loose, but it was clean. And that was all that mattered. When the door creaked open, every head turned. She entered slowly. Martha, that was her name. Martha Wilkes. She wore a simple dress, plain and white, stretched tight across her heavy frame. Her face was round, her cheeks flushed, her eyes lowered as if the floor itself was more interesting than the people staring at her. Daniel forced himself to look, really look, not at the shape of her body, not at the whispers echoing in his mind, but at her eyes. There was something there, not weakness, something guarded, something cautious. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Daniel felt an unexpected jolt, like touching a live wire. Martha looked away instantly. The ceremony was quick, no vows spoken from the heart, no promises whispered with hope, just words read aloud, binding two lives together with the finality of a snapped chain. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the silence felt louder than applause ever could. Outside, Martha's brother handed Daniel the rope tied to the cow without a word. The transaction was complete. That night they rode to Daniel's ranch in near silence. The moon hung low, silver and cold. The wagon creaked with every turn of the wheel. Daniel tried to speak, to say something, anything, but the words dried in his throat. What do you say to a woman you married for survival? When they arrived, the ranch house loomed small and lonely against the dark land. Daniel lit the lantern and pushed the door open. Inside, the place was clean but bare. One table, two chairs, a narrow bed against the wall. No curtains, no warmth beyond the flickering flame. Martha stepped inside slowly, taking it all in. Her expression didn't change, but her hands clenched at her sides. You can take the bed, Daniel said quietly. I'll sleep on the floor. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the door, turned and shut it. Then she locked it. The sound of the bolt sliding into place echoed through the small house like a gunshot. Daniel froze. Martha stood with her back to him, shoulders rising and falling as if she were steadying herself. Slowly she turned around. Her eyes were no longer downcast. They were sharp, alert, afraid, but determined. Don't come near me, she said firmly. Daniel raised his hands. I wasn't going to. She studied him, as if weighing every breath he took. I know why you married me, she continued, and I know what people say about me. But I will not be touched unless I choose it. Do you understand? Daniel swallowed hard. He nodded. I do. There was a long pause. The lantern crackled. The cow outside lowed softly, unaware of the tension binding the room. Martha exhaled, some of the tightness leaving her shoulders. Good, she said. Then we can survive this. Survive. Not love, not happiness, survival. She moved to the bed and sat down, keeping her distance. Daniel spread a blanket on the floor near the hearth. As he lay there staring at the ceiling, his mind raced. Who was this woman, really? And why did she look more afraid of the world than of him? Outside, the wind howled across the plains, rattling the walls like a warning. If you're feeling this tension, this mystery, and you want to know why Martha locked that door and what she's hiding, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now, because what's coming next will change everything. Morning came quietly, as if the world itself was unsure whether it was welcome inside that small ranch house. Pale light slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls, brushing over Daniel's tired face as he woke on the hard floor. For a moment he forgot everything, the wedding, the cow, the locked door. Then he heard movement, the soft rustle of fabric. Martha was awake. He stayed still, not wanting to startle her, listening as she moved carefully, like someone who had learned long ago to take up as little space as possible. She opened the door just enough to slip outside, then locked it again from the inside, even though he was still there. That single sound told Daniel more about her past than any words could have. When she finally unlocked the door and stepped out into the yard, Daniel rose and followed at a distance. The morning air was cold and clean. Martha went straight to the cow, her hands confident as she checked the rope, spoke softly and began to milk it with practiced ease. Daniel watched in surprise. This wasn't a woman who feared work. This wasn't a woman who was helpless. There was strength in the way she moved, quiet but undeniable. When she noticed him watching, she stiffened. "I can earn my keep," she said without looking at him. "I won't be a burden." Daniel shook his head. "I never thought you were," he replied. The words were simple, but they made her pause. Over the days that followed, an unspoken routine formed between them. They worked side by side without crossing invisible lines. Martha cooked, cleaned, repaired torn clothes. Daniel tended the land, fixed fences, hauled water. At night, the door remained locked. At first, Daniel felt the sting of rejection, the reminder that he was unwanted even in his own home. But slowly, that feeling changed into something else, respect. Whatever scars Martha carried, they were deep, and she guarded them fiercely. He would not be another man who tried to take without permission. One evening, as a storm rolled in and thunder cracked across the sky, Martha didn't lock the door right away. She sat at the table, hands wrapped tightly around a cup of warm milk. Her breathing was uneven. When the thunder struck again, she flinched. Daniel spoke gently, his voice low. "You don't have to be afraid here." Her eyes filled with tears she had clearly trained herself never to show. "Every place I've ever lived," she said, voice shaking, "was dangerous. Every man thought he owned me, my body, my choices." She swallowed hard. "I married you because I was tired of running." Daniel felt something break open inside his chest. "I married you because I was desperate," he admitted. "But I won't be the reason you're afraid anymore." That night, for the first time, Martha didn't lock the door. Weeks passed. The ranch began to change. The cow gave more milk than Daniel expected. The land responded to care. Laughter, soft, uncertain, but real, found its way into the house. Martha started to smile just a little when she thought Daniel wasn't looking. And Daniel began to realize something that unsettled him more than hunger ever had. He cared deeply, not because he owed her, not because of the cow, but because she was strong, wounded, and real. One evening, Martha stood beside him, watching the sunset bleed gold across the fields. "You know," she said quietly, "people think they know my story just by looking at me." Daniel nodded. "They think they know mine too." She turned to him then, really looked at him, and for the first time, there was no fear in her eyes, only trust. If this story is touching your heart, if you want to see how two broken lives slowly become whole, subscribe to the channel now. Don't miss what comes next, because their greatest test and their deepest love is still ahead.